Hello and welcome to the first episode of Suit Up. I'm your host, Ian Day.
And I am your other host, Salar Hassani.
So, with over 80 years of combined corporate workspace experience at large and small corporations worldwide, we've decided to put together this YouTube channel and podcast containing relevant experiences, best practices, and discussions that will help you thrive and get ahead in today's work environments with a little more ease.
Yeah, so totally delighted to have an opportunity to share some of our experiences. Ian and I have worked together in four different companies over
Yeah.
a few decades, at least 2.5 decades or thereabouts, and a combined, work experience of about 80 years, 70 to 80 years. So there's a
Wow, it
lot to
makes me feel really old you saying that, but I think it's
That's why
hopefully
I
it's a
shaved
good
the
thing.
beard.
Right. I'll do that for the next episode, definitely.
So yeah, delighted to do that, and the good, the bad, and the ugly of what we've learned in big and small corporations. As small as I remember my first job in Scotland, Edinburgh, Scotland, was a 10, 15 man company. It was a computer consulting company, and the largest company I worked for, like Adobe and Hitachi. Hitachi is 430,000 employees. So somewhere between those, there's all sorts of experiences we'll be delighted to share with you. Ian?
No, that's fantastic. I started my career out working in a fiberglass factory, but it's interesting. No matter where you start, you're always learning. There's always something new that you're going to take and build and understand, and take with you pretty much throughout your whole career. So it's very much a case of um, making sure that you can hang on to those experiences, which is what the currency is going forward as you progress in your career. So
Makes
what
sense.
we're going to do is, wherever possible, we're going to try and draw from real life experiences, some of the things that did work, things that didn't work, things that were just downright funny and probably a little embarrassing as well. But we're going to change the names of the people that we work with so that we can protect the innocent. And if you do come across a name that you recognize, it's purely fictitious and otherwise purely coincidental as well. Great. So in this episode, we're going to cover the topic of trust. And when we speak about trust, we're talking about trust between employee and manager, or trust between employee and project manager. As I was thinking about this, both of those relational paradigms tend to work together and have a lot of commonalities in them. And so, just to kind of kick us off with the topic of trust, I went to the Merriam-Webster dictionary. Merriam, lovely girl, always talking about words and stuff like that. But it says that according to the Merriam-Webster dictionary, trust is defined as an assured reliance on the character, ability, strength, or truth of someone or something. And then it's one in which confidence is placed. And then I added my own section there. I added the word dependability because I think that's actually a key element uh, to the whole topic of trust. So why is trust so important? Salah, what are your thoughts?
Oh, it is obviously one of the most important things in any relationships. Let me take a couple of quick angles on it. Years and years ago, um, I had the privilege of being trained by a mentor in Scotland who was talking about the subject of trust. This story is pretty old. I was working in a Japanese company at the time, and he was saying, think of everybody who's close to you, your friend, your family, your parents, whatever, your partner, your husband, your wife, hopefully one and the same person. And that was his joke, by the way. He said, unlike the laws of physics, when it comes to people, likes attract. It's not like magnets south to north. It's complete opposite. You end up being a commonality. So, for example, Ian and I think very similar. We were both brought up about the same era, same time period in Britain. So we have a lot of commonality when we speak about things with each other. And it creates likeness that, and we're both very sincere. Some people are kind of cutthroat. I remember early in my career, I was being told, nice guys don't make it, Salah, don't you? Because I was
Mm,
being too nice to people. I said, well, I'm gonna do it the way I know. That's the way I'm gonna do it, my way, because I gotta live within my skin. And Ian's exactly the same. So there's a likeness there, and that likeness created the trust, right? That I trust this guy because he's like me. I can think like him, and he thinks like me. Other than that, there's some stuff I put down here. These are just generic things: open communication between the individual, empowerment and ownership. Um, reducing stress and anxiety. When you have trust with someone, you have a lot more
mm.
less stress. Um, you take less risk, and so on. Psychologically, you feel safer, empowerment, engagement, and yeah, just a feeling that I can trust you and empower you with A, B, C, D, whatever it happens to be, and you come back and you will deliver against that. And if you cannot, we have still a very trusting dialogue. Why not? And what is it? What is the inhibiting, blocks that we need to get over?
Yes. No, and I think one of the things I picked up on what you just said there is trust. There's an element of risk in starting a relationship with the whole subject of trust. A new employee, for example, who is assigned to a team or assigned to a manager, has to establish that trust relationship with the manager, and the manager has to risk a little bit to be able to say, I'm going to give you an assignment, or I'm going to give you something, and it needs to get done, but it's going to be kind of like a toe in the water, or a proving ground. And so from that point onwards, there are more and more things as trust is built, and formed based upon experience. And I think, like you said as well, the commonality. I mean, you and I were both kind of come out of the punk rock era. I don't know about you, but I had weird hair color and all kinds of fun stuff like that, and that
I've
really
had hair.
helps. You had wasn't going to go there, but
Actually had long hair. Yeah.
right. But that element of establishing trust, there is a risk on both sides, and there are things as an employee, I think, that you can do to help build that trust with your manager. And there's a couple of things I put down here. The communication, as you mentioned, when you're having your initial meetings with your manager, make sure that you write down or take notes on the things that you talk about. Very important. I think, and I'd love to do a whole subject on taking notes, because really there's a lot to unpack there. But I think for this episode, if we just say that, if you go in with your laptop or with a notebook and you're talking and you're writing down things, or you're saying, oh, let me just make a note of that. That's important. I don't want to overlook that or bypass that. And then the second thing that I think is really important is to communicate as well. Now, specifically, if you're working on a project and you're working with a project manager, communicating a step that's been completed or something that you've done that other people will then take and build upon, like if you're working in a larger team, for example, that's going to be really critical. And I can remember a story, a little bit from a prior company where I think we were building environments in AWS, and there was one person specifically there that I was working with, who was actually responsible for doing a configuration step in that whole environment. There was many different steps involved in bringing an environment together in AWS, and so he had this one piece, but that piece was a dependent piece that had to get completed before somebody could, you know, follow on and take the work forward from there. And I was talking to him casually, and I said, "So what do you think? How long do you think this will take?" He said, "Oh, I'll have it done by the end of the day, no problem." And so I'm like, "Oh, that's fantastic, great, thanks." So just send me a Slack or an email or something like that when it's completed. And so as you do in a busy work environment, you're off to something else and trying to either put out another fire, or you're trying to build something else. And the next day came around, and I thought, oh golly, I haven't heard I haven't heard from this person, so let me just go ahead and establish contact. And so, I got hold of him again and said, "Hey, so how's it going? What's happening?" And he came back and said, "Oh, I'm sorry, I just got really busy, and I wasn't able to get to it. I had this, and this going on, but I'll go ahead and do it before lunchtime today." And it's funny how it all kind of revolved around food times. But anyway, that's another story. But immediately there was a couple of things that went off in my mind. The first one was, okay, the trust has been broken simply because you didn't communicate with me ahead of time to be able to say, something. It's 3 o'clock. I've got this project in pieces on my desk at the moment. I don't think I'm going to get to your configuration until tomorrow morning. Is that all right? I think that would have been something that would have helped to make sure that trust stayed intact. But in fact, the fact that he then went on to miss the second commitment, which he made, which was for lunchtime, completely, you know, took the train off the tracks there. But an interesting story how your word really is, and your commitments really are important, specifically to your manager and your project manager. Have you had instances like that where specifically you've seen areas where trust is broken, in that relationship?
Yes. There's a few things. It's a very complex subject, but it's a very important subject. First of all, the way you build trust with different people are different. Some people are just trusting, by nature. Some people are super cautious. I've had managers who kind of sat like this talking to me after a year. It's like they're still studying you, and it makes you feel nervous.
Hmm.
So every time that happened, I reflected on myself first, and say, what is it am I doing that encourages that kind of distrust? Can I do more? Can I say yes? Can I do more? I love what you said about writing things down. When you're talking to your manager, oftentimes the manager has thought things through. It's got objectives to meet, and it has delegated portions of that to you that makes up your responsibility. For you to sit there and kind of half sleep, nod your head and all that, and you're gonna forget some of them,
Hmm.
or it's not gonna hit you there and then. Oftentimes, when you write and you go back and look at it, say, ah, that's what it was meant to be. Or better still, without being annoying, go with follow-up questions there and then or afterwards. The managers, 9 out of 10, and you and I have both led large and small teams, many of them. I
Yeah.
haven't disliked people who do come back and say, can you explain that to me a little more? I'm a bit unclear. I want to make sure I deliver what I'm working on. Rather than the guy that goes whiz bang, wants to come on fireworks to impress you, and he or she hasn't fully understood what is to be delivered.
Yeah.
Um, Look, it's at the end of the day, it's no different to you and me talking to our managers. When our managers is asking for something to be delivered, we deliver. Occasionally, depending on the culture of the company, the country, and the person, they can't go delve into details and say, just do it. An example of that I can think of years back was there was a mergers and acquisition happening. Our company was about to buy another company. In fact, you used to work in that company with me.
Right.
Um, and I was speaking to my manager, and he wasn't permitted to fully disclose what the company is, the size of it, but he wanted me to make sure such and such is, lined up. At the time, actually, it was Sarbanes Oxley's and all that kind of jazz. Um, I felt disempowered by him not sharing with me what it is, the full details. But he just told me this task list needs to be finished.
Right.
Afterwards, my penny dropped. Of course, when the news breaks, now I get it. And now I get why he couldn't share this with me.
Mhm.
So circumstantially, things can change, but overall is set that as your objective, that I am going to create a trust with my manager, and most importantly, I want her to trust me,
Right.
right? Because I'm here not just to have fun, you know. It's called work. It's not called, holiday camp for a reason. It's called work, right? So I'm working. Yes, I want to have fun, but I'm not here just for pure fun. I'm here to deliver. I have my own ambitions and so on and so forth. I may or may not be here for 10 years, um, but I want to make my manager to trust me. At the same time, me trusting her builds over time, you know. So yeah, it's circumstantial.
Right. No, absolutely. I think one of the things that you had mentioned there with regards to uh, the overall career path, I remember people who worked on my team that I've trusted over the over my career, and in cases where I've wanted to, look for a person like that, for example, I'll always remember back to that particular person and think to myself, gosh, I really need a John Smith to be able to do X, Y, and Z, because they just got it, and they had a good etiquette. Um, I love the idea that you mentioned about following up with further questions for clarification. I don't think people do that enough, quite honestly.
Completely agree. Yeah.
And it's so easy to have a picture in your mind of, oh, that's what they want, bam. And then once that picture's formed in your mind, it's really hard to change it, if further details come along, because subconsciously you want to preserve that image and preserve your perspective on how to solve the problem or how to deliver that particular thing, whatever it happens to be.
And as you do that, there is a skill that we will talk about in future episodes, of course, and make it the main focus. One extremely important ability begins to build up, and that is connecting the dots. Some of the most successful projects you and I have done over the years, like Company A that you and I used to work with, and I think the first one was to get them over Sarbanes-Oxley, if you remember, which
I
this was
remember it well. Yeah.
amazing.
I
Another
still
one.
have the scars of that. It just kind
Ah,
of hit me a little bit on the arm and on the
oh,
back.
you remember that company was one of the first companies to ever get a Sarbanes-Oxley 404. So it was very
Right,
difficult, and it was difficult to obtain, and there was nothing, no example on how to. We kind of pretty much were thrown at the deep end. But
right.
what made it successful, and we did it in record time, were two things really. One, it's really outside the scope of this. Is another episode again. Is I remember going to the big feather chiefs of the company and say, my team and I will do nothing for the next, I think it was 6 months, nothing, none of these projects. This is the not to do list. And we're going to have to focus on this
Mm,
because none of these controls are in place. None of these, the documentation is in place and the processes are not in place and all that kind of stuff. So we're going to have to do that. So that was a hard sell, but it worked. The second thing that is relevant to the discussion here is we connected the dots. I didn't get down to the minutia of how to do it. I left that for Ian to do, right? It was just we are here, we want to get there, and there's this milestones in between we want to get there. How we navigate between them, Ian was far better than I was. He because he's got that personable, approach to dealing with people, and he came with the sub milestones and it was towards the main path. Occasionally we may have wavered around a little, but as a whole is connecting the dots from where you are to where you want to go. With the process of and as the result, as this 6 month project is progressing and Ian's hitting these milestones, guess what happens? The trust is building up and up and up and up,
yeah,
right? Because you're achieving. He gets it. He's going towards there. He's not trying to, it's a par five, golf. He's not gonna put it in the whole teeing off. He's gonna get it in the fairway. That's milestone number one. He's there. He's in the middle of the fairway. I love it. Okay, now we're gonna go around the dog's leg, and so on. So that's what Ian was good for. Was particularly strong, and the trust built up. And here we are, decades later, making these episodes for you.
I remember that. That was actually fun project. It pulled in a lot of people from a lot of different
Unbelievable.
departments.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
I think we were around 350 people in the department at the time.
yeah,
And I'm gonna say at least half of them, at least half of that number were working on that project. It started as a two-man, kind of put our heads together. How do we go about this?
right.
So there are many examples. I keep telling stories to folks here because some of them may resonate, some of them may not. But stories and fables is what distinguishes us between human beings and other animals. Our
Right.
culture, our history is made up of stories. In fact, half of our histories are probably not correct because they're stories and the winners wrote it, you know.
Right.
But here we are. So yeah, the stories are important.
But and I think to that point, as you start out in your career, if you're new and you're starting your first job or you've been in work for about a year or so, um, the currency that you take forward with you is actually your stories and your experiences.
Absolutely.
That becomes more important than the degree you got from college. Although the degree you got from college is very important in order to get you, for you to qualify, but your stories and your experiences really are the currency that you use going forward, and it'll take you from from role to role, and as you progress and you get promoted, hopefully, and you have teams of your own that you're running, you will bring all of these experiences back to bear on the very things that you're working on. So this is Salah and I telling you our stories and some of the fun things that have happened to us. And so I just have one last question I wanted to touch on here. Once broken, how can trust be restored between an employee and a manager? And I know that, I was scratching my head on that one, but I'd be interested to know if you have any thoughts on that, Sela.
Yeah, I think it's common sense. We all know it from a young age to an older age. Broken trust is harder to repair, oftentimes. And again, it's circumstantial, depending on the person, depending on your personality, and depending on the circumstances by which the trust was broken. But in vast majority of situations that I can think of is sincerity. Just going back to the individual or sometimes the team. You may have let a team down. You may have let your boss down. You may have let the colleagues down or a peer in another department, whatever it is, or your staff. Oftentimes you let your staff down. I You can just go and apologize, as simple, and mean it without being too grovelly. It's like saying, look, I made a mistake. I got it wrong, and I know in the process of doing that you may have kind of had your moments of disappointment. I've disappointed you. um, but I understand it, I know it, and I'm determined to go and fix it. A couple of occasions that's happened to me was phenomenal. Um, we were going through an office closure in Netherlands in one of my jobs, and the person I had in Amsterdam um, was a very, very creative, emotional person who kind of innovated everything he does in a different way every Monday morning, um, which showed how smart he was. But consistency wasn't there, the process wasn't there. And he was kind of hurting himself in doing that. As a result, um, there was a lot of politics in the office going on at the same time. He was severely stressed. So I was sitting in our office in Dublin, Ireland at the time, and he calls. And I said, "What's going on?" And he started telling me all the difficulties he's got. He got emotional. He started crying and he started swearing, really swearing at me and at the situation. And I just listened. This guy was exploding and he was venting. 5 minutes in his swearing, almost sobbing. He says, "You're still there, right?" I said, "Yes, I am." He said, "I was swearing at you, wasn't I?" I said, "Yes, you were, but that's okay." you
Mm.
know and he said, "I want to apologize. I don't know what happened. I was full of emotions." Now, that was an overt emotion. That was an overt moment of trust being broken. That is, this guy's not being professional. Sometimes it's not so overt, it's subconscious, it's covert. You're not aware you're doing it, or the individual who's doing it to you is not aware.
Right.
Um, Lastly, you may remember one of the things I always used to say to my staff, anybody who reported one on one with me, I used to say, I have a simple rule. If I'm not happy with something you're doing, I tell you there and then I'm not. Because that gives you an opportunity to A, correct my view of it, because you may be right and I may be mistaken. It gives you an opportunity to correct your approach if yours is incorrect, and most importantly, it sets expectations. Now, I expect you to do exact same thing to me, even though I'm the boss. I don't see it up and down. We are two people trying to get something done. If there's something like that I'm telling you that is making you uncomfortable, ask me. And if I can answer you, if it's not a secret M&A or something like we spoke about, I will let you know. All right. And otherwise, I don't know what it is that, is your pet peeve, and I keep doing it over and over again, you know. Yeah. So trust is work in progress, in summary. It's not got a magic thing like that. It depends on the circumstance, it depends on the person, and it's a process. It built the same way
Yeah.
as it builds up and it's broken, you got to build it back up.
Right. I think with broken trust, there is an opportunity to repair it, just as you have indicated there. But in repairing it, you can make it stronger than it was before.
Fair.
um, by apologizing or by admitting, potentially your role in it and saying, listen,
Absolutely.
I did get it wrong. I'm really sorry. This is what I'm going to do now going forward to make sure this doesn't happen again.
Well said. Yeah.
um, I'm going to make sure that everything going back to our one-on-one meeting example, I'm going to make sure that everything you tell me, I'm going to write down. Okay. And then I'm going to, make sure I get good clarification. And I'm going to always communicate with you if I have a problem, so that you're not blindsided by a report coming from somewhere else or anything like that.
Yeah.
And I think that an admission like that really does solidify and enhance trust that may be kind of teetering on being broken. In the example I gave, with the guy doing the configuration with the environment, he never did, and it was left undone. And if it's left undone, as a manager, I probably wouldn't place that, wouldn't ask him to do the same thing again without at least having somebody else to look over his shoulder or getting his manager involved. So there's definitely, I think, if you can admit to it and have an honest conversation with your manager about it, I think that's by far the best way, and to resolve anything that might have happened that way.
Do you think that's tethering around the subject of over promising, under delivering, and vice versa? That has something, because that's one of the ways you can break a trust. The example you had
Mhm.
in mind is somebody maybe with the best intentions in the world is telling you, I'm going to have it done by end of the day. He's trying to please you, right?
Yeah,
But
yeah.
he's over promising, and as a result, the consequences, trust is broken. Do you think that's got another facet of trust being broken?
I think that's probably one of the key areas where trust gets broken. Often a manager doesn't know the ins and outs of especially in technology. If you have a technologist who, for example, is an email specialist who works with, let's say, Microsoft Exchange, for example, um, you know, his manager probably isn't as familiar with that system, and we relies on the knowledge of the employee to be able to come back and say, yeah, this is kind of a 10-hour job, or this is something going to have to wait until the weekend. In other words, the manager has to rely on the experience of the employee to be able to deliver the you know what it's going to take to complete something. And yeah, if that's, I think that's one of the key areas where trust can get, where there's a misalignment there that can cause a breach in trust. So most
Another quick
definitely.
subject worth touching on, Ian, is we spoke about how we, when we started, did it, and how many of our staff have done it with the best intention in the world. Their intentions are good, but they actually do themselves damage. And one of the things people can do, and I did it for a long, long time. I remember I used to work for a Japanese company. I worked for a few Japanese company, but this particular one. I used to do a lot. I used to turn up very early before the time the work starts, and I used to leave very late, which is very common in the Japanese culture, and it used to be even more so in the past. But there was one Christmas Eve, I turned up to the house, and my wife, who was my girlfriend at the time, looked at when I walked in the house. It was like 11:30 at night or something crazy like that. She looked at me and said, "Why did you bother?" Meaning, why did you bother even coming home? You know.
Right, right.
And there was a realization with me between the work and home, balance that I didn't get. And ironically, I didn't know, but I was pretty close to burnout. I was overdoing it
Hmm.
in order to, build my career, build my trust, and all that. So as we talk about trust, being dedicated, um, again, one of my old mentors in the old country, I was Scotland again in Edinburgh. The guy was saying, success in your career is three D's or four D's: dedication, devotion, and divorce. So uh,
Oh,
it was a very and the guy was divorced incidentally. It was about reminding you the fine balance,
yeah,
because it's all about setting expectations, and you can set an expectations that yes you can meet, but for how long and at what pace, so what you commit to at the end of the day to go and build your VPCs and the entire environment and bringing grounds up in multi-region, whatever it happens the guy had promised you.
hmm,
uh, he may well have done that, but at the cost of not eating, not talking, not going home on time, and all that kind of stuff. And he sets an expectation for you that the next Monday he can do the same. So Ian will go back to the guy and or the girl and say, "Can you do that just like you did last week?" No,
right,
really, I worked my guts out. I
yeah,
had lots of problem by the time I got home. My kid was sick, what have you.
right.
So trust has got a balance. That it needs to be repeatable. And one of the things that is the word I want to emphasize to our friends who are watching us is consistency.
Hmm.
You know, that itself is a sub definition of trust, because if one day you are like this and the next day you're like this and the next day you're up here because it's circumstantial, you're just breaking the trust. This person, I don't know where I stand with this. One day she's up, one day she's down. One day she
Right,
delivers, one day she doesn't. So try to maintain. Nobody's 100% flatlining.
right,
It's not linear, but just smooth out the waves, and that creates trust itself.
right. A gentle undulation in commitment and performance. No,
Absolutely.
absolutely. I think the other element of this, as you were mentioning that, I think planning is very key, and good hygiene of time management and how you know what it is that you're doing. And I realize that in some environments that's very possible. In other environments, it's like, no, you've just got to basically brace for battle and take the onslaught that comes to you for that day. But I think there are certain things that you can do to help make that workflow regulated, so that you are providing that consistency as well. And some of that I think comes a lot with um, planning and your own time management. Things like make sure you take proper breaks. I mean, it may sound really silly. In my career as a software engineer, there have been times where I hit my head against the wall, like this white wall back here, and you can probably see little bits of blood on there, but no. But and then if I step away and I walk away and I go and just take even 5 minutes to get a cup of coffee or a cup of tea, and then I come back, it's like something happens in your mind that resets, and you're able to go after it and solve the problem that you continue, that you had been stuck on. But yes, I think certainly some of that initial planning, making sure that you have good good habits for planning and working is going to pay dividends in the end. Uh,
Absolutely. Absolutely.
well, that just about sums it up for today. If you've enjoyed this episode, please go ahead and click the subscribe button and give us a like. And it really helps us and it motivates us to keep pushing new content out that will help you. And we want to thank you. Please put in the comments anything that you would like us to address and to touch on. And we will catch you next time.